While the world waited, Saddam Hussein met every overture of peace with open contempt. August 2nd, 1990. Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein ordered the Iraqi military to invade Kuwait. While the world waited, Saddam Hussein systematically raped, pillaged, and plundered the tiny nation. Several months later, UN forces, the vast majority of which were American, swiftly defeated Iraqi forces and freed Kuwait. This was the greatest military success in the late 20th century for America. Like all wars, this was a conflict. However, in a sense, it was also a compromise. After America's ineffective war in Vietnam, America's faith in their military and government was very low. However, the Persian Gulf War was the opposite. It was a very successful and very short war.
Why did Saddam invade Kuwait? It was all about jealousy and lust. Saddam gained power in 1979 when he became president. In 1980, he waged a war against Iran, mainly over the Shatt al-Arab waterway which leads to the Persian Gulf. That was Iraq's only convenient access to the Persian Gulf. Iran and Iraq both thought they owned it. During the war, Iraq borrowed a lot of money from Kuwait, so after the war, Iraq was deeply in debt.
Hussein declared that he was not going to repay Kuwait because he claimed that Kuwait produced too much oil for Western countries, thus reducing the price of oil, and siphoning oil from Iraq's border by positioning the drill at an angle. He claimed that by drilling at an angle, Kuwait was drilling from the Rumaila oil field on the Iraq/Kuwait border. Hussein also claimed that Kuwait was part of Iraq. Furthermore, for Iraq, being deeply in debt with a rich neighboring country was offensive. Saddam Hussein claimed that he had the right to invade and take over Kuwait. His troops crossed the border and began invasion on August 2nd, 1990. An event that affected the Persian Gulf War was the UN deadline of January 15th, 1991. When Iraq had not yet withdrawn from Kuwait by this date, the world could wait no longer. The first part of the Persian Gulf War was Operation Desert Shield.
After tearing down Kuwait, it appears Saddam planned on invading Saudi Arabia. He was gathering troops on the Kuwait/Saudi border.
Operation Desert Shield was a military action to defend Saudi Arabia, following a request made to America on August 7th, 1990. American troops first landed to defend Saudi Arabia on August 9th. Saddam Hussein was a ruthless man. The comparison can be made to Adolf Hitler. As Hitler planned to invade country after country, it appeared Saddam may have been planning to do the same. Saddam Hussein was not friendly to neighboring countries. By God, we will make the fire eat up half of Israel if it tries to do anything against Iraq. This would also lead one to believe that he may have continued invading. During the Persian Gulf War, America first defended Saudi Arabia. However, Operation Desert Shield became Operation Desert Storm. Operation Desert Storm was the plan that by using force, Saddam Hussein's forces will leave Kuwait, the legitimate government of Kuwait will be restored to its rightful place, and Kuwait will once again be free. Iraq will eventually comply with all relevant United Nations resolutions. The military succeeded and completed all objectives given to them by President George Bush Sr. Desert Storm also greatly weakened Saddam's military force. Not a main objective, but it was a great success in the eyes of America, considering Iraq at the time had one of the strongest militaries in the world, which Saddam often touted. We are not intimidated by the size of the armies or the type of hardware the U.S. has brought. Not to mention, Saddam also had a strong nuclear bomb potential and many chemical weapons. While the world waited, Saddam sought to add to the chemical weapons arsenal he now possesses, an infinitely more dangerous weapon of mass destruction, a nuclear weapon. During the airstrikes that started on January 17th, 1991, these weapon manufacturing and storage facilities were some of the main targets. The plan behind this was to protect the lives of coalition forces by targeting Saddam's military arsenal. The first significant ground engagement between U.S. and Iraqi forces was on Saudi territory on January 30th, 1991. Shortly after that, February 8th, America had reached the point of having over 500,000 troops in the Persian Gulf. Not only did Saddam take away the freedom of Kuwait, but his men thought they were free to do whatever they wanted to Kuwait. Many civilians were tortured and killed. This did not only include men and women, but the innocent lives of children who were subjected to unspeakable terrors. That is why America went to war. We are here for more than just the price of a gallon of gas. What we are doing is going to chart the future of the world for the next 100 years. It's better to deal with this guy now than 5 years from now. All of the U.S. military involved were volunteers. There are things worth fighting for. A world in which brutality and lawlessness are allowed to go unchecked isn't the kind of world we're going to want to live in. February 22nd, 1991. America gave a warning to Saddam to be out of Kuwait by the 24th, or ground forces would begin attacking Iraq. 2 days later, Iraq had not yet left Kuwait, so American ground troops attacked Iraq. By April 11th, Iraq was completely removed from Kuwait and all fire had ceased.
Iraqis will never forget that on August 8, 1990, Kuwait became part of Iraq legally, constitutionally, and actually. It continued to do so until last night, when withdrawal began.
What Saddam was saying was that he believed Kuwait still belonged to Iraq, but he was forced to leave and release Kuwait. The Iraqi forces are conducting the mother of all retreat.
If coalition forces had not gotten involved, Saddam would very likely have charged into Saudi Arabia and taken it for Iraq. This would not only take away a country's freedom, but would have cut off one of America's main oil suppliers, and thus shortly shut down the country. America runs on oil, so when they didn't get as much as they needed, oil prices would have skyrocketed. Once the reserve of oil ran out, they would no longer have cars or much electricity. Then there's the fact that Saddam would probably not stop at Saudi Arabia. Under his control, Iraq was very aggressive to its neighboring countries. While the world prayed for peace, Saddam prepared for war. After Iraq had taken Saudi Arabia, Saddam would probably have led Iraq south into Yemen, Oman, or the United Arab Emirates. The Persian Gulf War was the most significant war in the late 20th century, and up to today it keeps that title. One of the events that was influenced by the Persian Gulf War was the War on Terrorism. In 2001, the U.S. did not yet know who was behind the suicide bombings on the Twin Towers, but they knew they would eliminate the threat and restore the peaceful mindset America had been in. This led to the war in Afghanistan. After America discovered where the suicide bombings on the Twin Towers had been sent from, they were vengeful and needed to take care of a very possible threat to more than just America. During debates about Afghanistan, the U.S. government did all they could to tie the words Afghanistan and Iraq together in people's minds. They succeeded and then began the war in Iraq. Many believe the military should have been sent into Iraq in 1991 after they freed Kuwait to remove Saddam from power. It did not happen then, but this time it was the main objective. What many overlooked, though, is that they thought the war against Iraq would be easy because the previous in 1991 was so successful and quick.
March 20th, 2003. The U.S. entered Iraq. Here's 2008 and American troops are still in Iraq today. Had it not been for the swift ending of the Persian Gulf War, the war in Iraq today probably never would have happened. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and they will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet they go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world.
Both conflict and compromise happened during those months during 1990 and 1991. The Persian Gulf War was a very significant conflict. While the world waited, America and many other countries ended an injustice in the Middle East.